Correct.
If any.
Welcome to the Children and Family side.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee meeting for February the 4th, 2025. Before we begin, I would like to remind the members to sign into the meeting using your microphones. Okay. And let's stand for a prayer. Representative Bosso is going to lead us in a prayer, and remain standing for the pledge, please. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll or take the roll? Let's all sign in and I guess that does it then.
So just press the president button. There we go.
Okay. Clerk, could you please call through?
Madam Chair, you have 6 members present.
Thank you. Members, do we have any personal orders? Seeing none? Oh, Representative Harris, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. And so I think I get to say that I am finally the ranking Democratic member on this committee now. I've got an opportunity to serve the last 4 years on this committee, and excited to be on here with you for another 2 years. And to all the new members, I can't wait to see the good work we do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for coming back. Thank you for asking to be back on this committee. We appreciate that. Let's introduce ourselves. It is a new committee, and I want to welcome all of you. And, you know, we have a little saying here that we want to save all the children of the world, and especially in Tennessee. But if we can do it one at a time, that is what we're going to do. And so we try to do a lot of hard work, and some of it's not pretty and some of it's sad. But at the end, we hope that we've done the right thing for the children of the state of Tennessee. So let's go around the room and introduce ourselves, starting with Chairman Doggett.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Lady Littleton. It is my first time on this committee. I represent District 70, Giles, Lawrence, and Lincoln counties. It is a great honor to be here. I've had some very impactful legislation that I've brought before this committee in years past, and now we will have an opportunity to serve on this committee, and so I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you. Thank you. What's up, Joe?
Chairman Keesley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lady. Appreciate it. We're glad to welcome Representative Towns. Thank you, Joe, for joining us today. I represent, it's my turn, Joe. It's my turn.
Out of order, Joe.
Call him out of order, Chair Lady. All right, Kelly Kiesling, House District 38. We serve actually 4.5 counties, Macon, Clay, Pickett, Scott, and then the upper half of Fentress County. I might add, Chair Lady, that we're home to some rather important people, or have been. We'll begin Sergeant Alvin York's home and his state park up there. Cordell Hull, Secretary of State for FDR back in the day. There's so many other things that I feel like would be important enough to mention, but I'll conclude down on the west side of our district, Macon County. Russell Smith, who was a founding member of the Amazing Rhythm Aces. Chair Lady, can you tell us who their hit song, The Amazing Rhythm Aces? It would be Third Rate Romance, Low Rent Rendezvous.
I do know that song.
I'm sure you do. Of course you do. And as well as Rita Coolidge, who is Chris Christopherson's second wife. So with that, I will pass the gavel on over.
Was that kind of like our day in history?
Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you. Representative Alexander.
Hi, Rebecca Alexander. I represent District 7, Washington County. Children are my heart. So, Mary, or Chairman, I'm thrilled to be on your committee.
We're thrilled to have you, and thank you for being on the committee. Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Gino Bolso. I'm the state representative for House District 61, which is in Williamson County and consists principally of most of the city of Brentwood, Tennessee, and a good chunk of Franklin as well.
Representative, thank you. We're glad to have you. I was worried about not having an attorney, but now we have one, so that's good. So yes, we're glad you're here. Some of that stuff gets it. Yeah. Representative Harris.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And State Representative Tori Harris. I represent House District 91 in Memphis, Shelby County. I have a large part of Midtown going all the way south. A good portion of the colleges and hospitals are in my district, so I see and get to represent children on a regular basis. I've been on this committee now year 5, and really excited about the work that we will continue to do. I don't know if I have any fun facts about Memphis because everything is fun in Memphis. So I will pass it over to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being on our committee and look forward to working with you. Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. For
And
me,
forgive me for calling you Joe.
oh, no
when I
problem.
called you out.
No problem. You're my chairman. So this is my actually first opportunity to serve on this committee. Know a little bit about it. Always heard a lot about it. Know it's a lot of work to be done, especially when you're dealing with children, families in our community across the country, but specifically more so in Tennessee. My district is 84. That's Memphis, the airport area, extending out to Collierville and some other parts of Winchester, and almost over the state line, but it's not. I buttress up to Representative Chisholm's district. Today, Madam Chair, also I have my intern here. I wanted to let my intern introduce himself. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to meet this young man. If you don't mind, you should stand up and tell him who you are and where you're from. He just came back from school too. He comes to go to school, then comes back. He's okay.
Welcome. We're glad to have you. Let's give him a round of applause.
And if you need him to do something, put him to work. He's not afraid. He's a very poised young man, but he doesn't know how much work is going to be done, but he's going to learn a lot. And so glad to have you as well. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And we're glad to have you aboard. So we'll also be assisted by my legislative assistant, Christian Mahan, our research analyst, Jackson Stubblefield, our committee attorneys, Michelle Fogarty and Elizabeth Insania, and our clerk, Cami. And I'm sorry, I don't know who our sergeant at arms is. Johnny. And we're so glad to have you here and thank you for the job that you do for us. We appreciate you. Okay. So now we've got to get used to this again. Members, as you all know, we have a voting system this year. And before we get started, I like to hold a mock vote to ensure that we are familiar with it before going forward. So with that, clerk, could you please open the vote? So we're going to vote for Representative Towns being the last one to join the meeting. And do we accept him back or here? So is that going to be a yes or no? Representative Towns, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, because I had in mind something a little bit different than that. I want to vote that you should have barbecue for us every time we come to the meeting or lunch or something of that nature. And I think that's far more appealing than whether you accept me back or not.
Well,
And we'll make it Memphis barbecue too, so I don't know how you're going to get it.
You have to bring the Memphis barbecue.
We can do it.
Chairman Doggett, are you signed in?
We'll do it. I got to hit it a little harder. That's what it is. Yeah.
I'm going to just push it hard. Okay. Madam Clerk, would you take the vote, please? Or wait, does any member wish to change their vote?
I think I'm going to vote no.
Go ahead. I voted no for you too. Clerk, would you close the vote?
Change my vote.
So the motion carries.
Madam Chair, you have
Oh, I'm
5
sorry.
ayes, 1 nay, and 1 present not voting.
Thank you. We've all got a lot to get used to, don't we? I'm glad we did the small one right away so at the beginning. So thank you all for bearing with me on that. And maybe we've all learned a little bit about our voting system here. With our organizational business out of the way, we're now going to go out of session and hear from Kylie Graves, who's with the Second Look. And we're so glad that she could be with us today. She's going to do the annual report, and she has a little PowerPoint for us as well. But it's really special that she's here today because I was afraid she's going to have that baby before she could before she could do the presentation. So we're really glad you're here. So if you'll come forward, we are now out of session.
you. Kylie Graves, Director of Data Policy and Communication for the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth and Director of the Second Look Commission. And so we're going to today go over mostly the Second Look Commission in our annual report, briefly talk about the Commission on Children and Youth, which the Second Look Commission is administratively attached to, and then at the end, just cover a couple of points from the annual State of the Child report. And so I've got Richard Kennedy.
Ms. Graves, could you kind of explain what the second look is, since we have a whole new slate of
Yes.
members here, please, other than me and Representative Harris?
Yes.
Thank you.
Would you like, I have a section in the PowerPoint to kind of go over that, or do you want me to do that now?
Just give a little.
Okay.
preview.
Second Look Commission is a legislatively created body. It's a multidisciplinary team of professionals who work in the child abuse space. So we have representation from the courts, from Department of Children's Services, nonprofit groups, law enforcement, public defenders, and district attorney generals. And essentially what we do is we look at instances where there's been a second or subsequent instance of severe child abuse. We get a list of children who meet those cases each year from DCS. Typically, it's about 1,000 cases a year, representing about 600 individual kids. From that, each year we'll pull a sample of cases. We can't review all of them, but we pull a sample to look at, and we look at that child's entire history with the Department of Children's Services, with the courts, any law enforcement interactions, things of that nature. Pull all of that together in a case file, and members will read through that child's history before the meeting. And then we'll go through and point out areas in the case where things went well and seem to work and need to be replicated, things that may have fallen through the cracks, areas where policy was followed, but it wasn't maybe the right policy. And so then we make recommendations to Governor's Office, General Assembly, or the other bodies around ways to better protect children who have experienced severe child abuse.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. All right, we'll go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon, Chair Lady Littleton. It's good to see you again today. Members of the committee, my name is Richard Kennedy, and I have the great privilege to serve as the Executive Director of the Commission on Children and Youth. I want to apologize. I'm recovering from some dental surgery and feel like I'm speaking with marbles in my mouth. So I apologize if it's coming across that way. So the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth is an independent, nonpartisan state agency. The members of the General Assembly created the commission in 1987, and we are tasked with ensuring the state's policies and programs effectively promote and protect the health, well-being, and development of children and youth. We are a little bit unlike some of the cabinet level agencies in that we are governed by a 21-member board of commission members. Each of those members are appointed by the governor, and we're very fortunate that the current chair of the commission is the Honorable Judge Rob Filyaw in Chattanooga. There are several areas where we fulfill that statutory requirement mandate for us. We really kind of think about our work in 4 different buckets: a data and insights bucket, a collaboration bucket, a policy advocacy bucket, and public awareness. In the data insights section, we look at so much data and trends and indicators on how our children and youth are doing in so many different areas. One of the things I'm really proud of that the commission does is I think we do an exceptional job of breaking people out of silos and coming together in collaborative efforts to really look across all of the systems that serve our children and identify ways that we can work together more effectively, efficiently, and in ways that produce better outcomes for all of our children and families. In the policy advocacy space, we have policy briefs on issues impacting children, youth, and families. And really what I would say at this point to you all is we serve as a resource for you all. So if there's a particular topic you're interested in, if there's something you want to learn more about, certainly want you to feel free and encouraged to call us, and we will put together as much information as we can to bring together and share with you all. And then really the fourth bucket is public awareness. We are really tasked with making sure that citizens across the state, communities across the state know those issues that are impacting our children, youth, and families so that it can kind of stay front and center in their mind. So when we break down the different program strategies that we have, Kylie has told me I have 3 minutes total to talk, so I'm just going to hit the high points. But if there are any of these areas that you're interested in learning more about or being involved with, if you'll reach out or just let us know, we'll certainly make sure that we get you more information. So we work with our friends and colleagues at the Department of Children's Services, and we have our fingers stuck in child welfare and youth justice in a couple of areas. One is we coordinate a council on youth justice. We implement the provisions of the Federal Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. We have an ombudsman program, and we have the Second Look Commission that Kylie talked about. In our statewide partnership, we have 9 regional councils on children and youth across the state, one in each of the development districts. We have a partnership with our friends and colleagues at the Department of Mental Health to coordinate a council on children's mental health, partnership with our friends at Health to do a home visiting leadership alliance. We have a Resilient Tennessee Collaborative. We have the Tennessee Young Child Wellness Council and a Youth Transitions Advisory Council that's really focused on those older young folks who are aging out of the foster care system and transitioning to adulthood. And in the data policy and communications space, we have several requirements. One is we're required to submit budget recommendations to the governor and members of the legislature annually. We do county profiles on how our children are doing in each of the counties and really rank how those counties are doing compared to each other so that we can learn from counties that are being really successful and really look at where there might be a need for some targeted resources. We have a brand new product strategy that's coming out of the commission, and that's something that's known as the Future Data Dashboard. That is an online portal that any Tennessean can access to be able to look at how our kids are doing over time. We hope that that's especially beneficial for organizations across the state who are looking at how they're going to prioritize their programming or how they're going to use Tennessee specific data to apply for grants and the like to help support their work. You all have tasked us with doing a resource mapping report that we submit to you each year by April 15th. And that is where we look at all of the state and federal dollars that are spent in Tennessee and where we're spending those dollars at point of expenditure. And the last thing is we're required to do an annual State of the Child report that is a comprehensive report that looks at all things impacting our kids, whether it's education, health, mental health, child welfare, family economic success, a myriad of different data points in that. So as always, I'm really happy to come talk with you guys, give you more information about the work of the commission or any of these specific areas. But that is kind of a quick overview of the commission. And I know you want to hear more specifically from Kylie. So I will pass back to Kylie.
Yeah, absolutely. So Second Look Commission gave y'all a brief overview. Part of that recommendations and findings culminates in an annual report each year that is delivered to y'all on New Year's Eve. So I'm sure you spend your New Year's Eve reading that. So our 2024 annual report is what we're going to be looking at. Those are cases that occurred in fiscal year 23. One of the challenges with Second Look, we get our cases from DCS based on the end of the, when DCS closes the case. For the most part, that's occurring in the same fiscal year. Sometimes, particularly our abuse death cases, those can sometimes take years. And so we might actually be looking a couple years back. But Second Look Commission, like we mentioned, it's administratively attached to the to TCCY, meaning we help organize the meetings, get the annual report together. We are the ones who handle the audit process, but it is its own independent body made up of the membership. And so established in code shall review an appropriate sampling of cases involving a second or subsequent instance of child abuse in order to provide recommendations and findings to the General Assembly on whether or not severe child abuse cases are handled in a manner that provides adequate protection to the children of this state. And I went over it briefly, but it's a multidisciplinary team comprised of representation through all of it. So we have TBI, we have 2 members from the Senate and 2 members from the House. We have a child abuse pediatrician. They provide a lot of great insight, nonprofit advocates, a private attorney, and several of the others that I had mentioned. When we look at our fiscal year 2023 cases, we had 623 unduplicated victims of second or subsequent severe abuse. That went up about 4% from the previous year. When we look at cases where we're taking into consideration both the first instance of abuse and the second instance, 40% of those cases are drug-exposed infant or child cases. When we're looking at just that second instance of abuse, the severe abuse, the majority of that is sexual abuse. That's kind of always been the trend. So 64% of those cases are sexual abuse, followed by 22% are drug exposed, and then 5% are physical abuse. 9% are others. That is typically lack of supervision is one of those. We get a couple of medical maltreatment types, but this is going to be the big categories there. This is kind of how the unduplicated victims have trended over the years. It's always covered kind of right around that 600 or so. I'm not sure what happened in fiscal year 2012. I wasn't here at that point yet, but that just seems like a bit of an anomaly. We've really been around 500 to 600 each year. One of the things that we do, we pull a sample of cases. However, we always review cases that come to us from DCS where there's been a prior substantiation of abuse and then a secondary one that's an abuse death. So the second instance of abuse resulted in the child's death. We'll always review those cases. And so based on, there's 2 charts here. One of them is based on the date that DCS closed the case. And so that's kind of how we review them on the fiscal year. But what we've noticed and we've talked about previously is that there were some challenges with autopsy delays. And so a lot of the deaths were actually occurring earlier on. So that second chart is really looking at the trends in these deaths based on the actual date of death. In the current year, we're reviewing 6 abuse death cases. One of those was from fiscal year 21, so still lagging a little bit. One is from fiscal year 22. 2 are going to be from fiscal year 23 and 2 from fiscal 24. So that's where we see the most time range is on those abuse death cases. And we go through and identify some key findings. These are kind of our broad findings. In the report, you'll find more specifics related to maybe individual cases themselves, but these are kind of the trends we're seeing. So when we look at strengths observed, members were encouraged by the response and support provided to parents who were having challenges with substance use. Members frequently discussed the success of safe baby courts and discussion on how to incorporate that into cases with our older youth. Members several times noted the impact that the caseworker had on the child, a positive impact. Members noted that the specialized teams created by DCS appeared to be working well for complex or special populations. DCS has established a human trafficking team to handle those cases, a drug team as well for some substance use challenges. Members were also encouraged by instances where all parties involved in the case collaborated together and worked effectively. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in child abuse cases, and so when they all work together really well, we've seen that that leads to better outcomes for the children. Around foster homes and placements, there are opportunities for additional support for caregivers and families caring for children, particularly relative caregivers or kinship caregivers. Members expressed concerns regarding the safety, supervision, and care provided to children in placements. One of our recommendations there around foster homes and placements is that there should be more consistent implementation of the department's existing policy on immediate protection agreements. The members discussed that an immediate protection agreement is designed to be a short-lived document, an agreement between DCS and the parents, not a permanency tool. And so a petition should be filed with the juvenile court within 10 days of the implementation of the IPA when DCS determines that they're going to file. So just getting back to not having IPAs be a long-term placement strategy. Around services, members continue to see significant challenges in obtaining services that are timely and appropriate. Access to a variety of mental health services, including outpatient residential and varying needs of acuity, continue to be a need for children across the state. The state should continue to fund mental health services and initiatives to expand the mental health workforce in Tennessee. Members also discussed building off of existing services, such as the Tennessee Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Education Support, CARE or CAPES, which supports the integration of mental health care into pediatric primary care. The state should also evaluate mental health providers who provide services to children and accept TennCare, assessing the acuity of care provided, the modality, so is it in-person or is it telehealth provided, and their ability to provide appropriate services to children who have experienced severe abuse. Looking at transition homes, members noted challenges with documentation around children's placement and time at transition homes, and there were concerns regarding the safety and supervision of children in transition homes. Members noted that many of the children, as far as recommendations, many of the children placed in transition homes have extensive trauma history, resulting in reactive and challenging behaviors. Many of them have a higher need of care, and staff are not adequately prepared to manage the need or number of children in the facilities. Current policy establishes that a ratio of 3 to 1 should be consistently followed. And then additionally, members recommended that the policy should be updated to provide guidance on procedure in the event that a kid arriving at a transition home creates a scenario where they're outside of that 3 to 1 ratio. What would be the process then? Additionally, around transition homes, the department should ensure that the placement of children in transition homes is appropriately tracked and that those records are retained. Also, similarly, that the child daily log for transition homes that tracks the child's progress in any instances that have occurred is being completed for every child every day, and that those records are also being retained as well. Due to the trauma and vulnerability already experienced by many youth in transition homes, members, I wanted to reiterate the importance that all adults in transition homes have background checks as outlined in DCS's protocol there. Additionally, key opportunities or missed opportunities for earlier intervention. There continues to be a pattern of multiple prior allegations of sexual abuse, later resulting in sexual behaviors being exhibited by the child themselves. In several cases, members felt earlier and appropriate intervention could have changed outcomes for the children. In particularly complex cases, members felt there was an opportunity or a missed opportunity for the department to use additional available resources. In certain cases, members felt efforts to continue to involve biological parents were preventing permanency. Members continue to find instances in which engaging the fathers can provide permanency for a child. And members noted that engaging multidisciplinary collaboration can lead to better services and responses for children. Around recommendations, there's a need for additional services as well as clearer understanding of who is currently providing services for youth with sexual behaviors across the state. The Department of Children's Services and Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services should work together to establish a database and contain information for providers who can treat and offer services for youth with sexual behaviors. As the department implements a new case management software, they should consider implementing a feature that would allow for quick access to all services the child is receiving, both those billed to the department and not. Right now in the TFAC system or the department system, it's hard to really see what services a kid is getting if they're not being billed through the department. So it's not a quick glance there. Also recommended that the Second Look Commission should review data from the Department of Children's Services regarding permanency and family member IPAs in the coming year. Additionally, the department should establish a policy that once a case has a certain number of referrals or overlapping investigations, a multidisciplinary team meeting shall occur. During that meeting, it should be determined if a third-party review, such as centers of excellence, should be brought in for assistance. We've noted in certain cases, multiple referrals can start coming in all at once, or there's multiple investigations going on. And so it's really helpful for everything to kind of pause, the team to come together and make sure that nothing's falling through the cracks as those multiple investigations are occurring. Additionally, Second Look should review DCS guidelines regarding custody decisions and continue to encourage familial placements, including paternal contacts. Around courts and legal, there continues to be additional opportunities for communication and follow-up regarding criminal charges. Members expressed concerns regarding processes and procedures related to custody and child protective investigative teams. Members found need for additional support, access to legal services, and opportunities for increased documentation. Members noted several scenarios in which the child appeared to be at risk of further victimization. For recommendations, Second Look recommends additional training to courts on the newly developed pro se dependent and neglect petition filing forms, and trainings around for court staff around the requirement to accept pro se filings should be provided to all court staff. Currently, statute states that within 15 days of the completion of a district attorney general's investigation, that a district attorney general shall advise the department and the child protective investigative team on whether or not prosecution is justified and appropriate. However, there's opportunity for this to be more consistently and regularly followed. The district attorney general's conference should work together with local district attorneys to capture the data of decisions on whether or not they move forward with prosecution following a prosecution recommendation from the child protective investigative team. Members also recommend a study to examine the effects of the recently passed Protecting Children from Social Media Act on social media concerns specific to foster care youth, runaway youth, and human trafficking. With medical, again, Second Look Commission found that delay in autopsies impacted the investigation and prosecution of a case. However, as we were meeting this year, DCS did note that since legislation around autopsy prioritization was passed last year, we have seen reduced timelines. So we're seeing improvement from that Second Look recommendation and legislation carried by Chair Lady Littleton. Members noted that although secondary brain bleeds occur after a minor injury, they're often not fatal. Members stated that due to the lack of information available, it was difficult to determine if the injury that occurred was accidental or inflicted. Also, members had noted that it was odd to include the term reasonable degree of medical certainty in a DCS report. That's typically a legal term, so that was just something that was brought up as well. Members recognize the importance of multidisciplinary team conversations to reach the appropriate child protective investigative team determination. Members recommend more consistent participation in SIPP meetings by law enforcement partners. And then also members recommend encouraging SIPP members to obtain direct information from medical providers evaluating the child's medical examiners for accurate interpretation of the team's decisions. So really talking to those who were specifically treating the child and their injuries. Members noted that caseworker challenges at DCS resulted in TFAX entries and timelines of the case not being correct. Members noted a need for more support for DCS caseworkers and also increased consistency and thoroughness of hotline reports. For recommendations around Department of Children's Services, the department should change existing policy to require that the referent for a child abuse referral be contacted for additional information on hotline referrals that are screened out to be added to an open case. So members found that there was some information that was getting missed out on because it was a second report and that was just being screened out. And so the referent wasn't being interviewed further. A case management system that is replacing TFAX should be developed with the ability to include the current case manager's name and other relevant information for the referent when a hotline referral is screened out to be added to an open or existing case. So that's a brief overview of the Second Look report, looking at state of the child in Tennessee and kind of an overview of how kids are doing across the state. These are all of the various topics that are covered in that report. There are quite a few. As Richard said, we kind of try and cover childhood as a whole across the spectrum. But what we see is that overall child poverty, we have 19.7% of children in the state living in child poverty. We had some pretty significant gains between 2019 and 2022, where we dropped to the lowest we've been and closest to the national average that we've ever been. Over this last year, we did see that tick back up just a little bit. And so we're back on par with where we were in 2019. Children under 5 have a slightly higher percent of those living in poverty at 20%. We do see some concerning trends around suicidal ideation of high school students. In 2023, among Tennessee high school students, nearly 1 in 4 reported within the last year that they had attempted or considered attempting suicide. Nearly 1 in 5 of those high school students reported that they had made a plan of how they would attempt suicide within the last 12 months. And more than 1 in 7 did attempt to die by suicide within the last year. Of those who had attempted to die by suicide, about 30% reported that they had reached out to someone for help prior to their attempt. And then kind of consistently across the board, we do see that the mental health challenges and substance use challenges are more severe for female students or adolescent girls in particular. Experiences of adversity or trauma, nearly 1 in 4 high school students report they've ever been separated from a parent or guardian because they went to jail, prison, or a detention center. And this is higher than the national average at 14%. More than 1 in 5 students didn't want to go to school on at least one day within the last month surveyed because they felt unsafe on their way to school or to or from school, which was a significant increase between 2021 and 2023. 1 in 4 students reported that they saw someone get physically attacked, beaten, stabbed, or shot in their neighborhood. Almost 1 in 3 students reported they had lived with someone who had a problem with drugs or alcohol. And then among those who dated someone within the last year, 1 in 7 Tennessee high school girls were in a physically violent relationship within that year. But what we do see is that 86% of parents reported that their child always or usually bounces back quickly when things don't go their way. 93% of parents report there's at least one other adult in the child's school, neighborhood, or community who knows the child well and that they can rely on for guidance or advice. And then 84% of Tennessee parents report there's someone they could turn to for day-to-day emotional support or help with raising children. When we look at child welfare and custodial demographics, Tennessee has an older custodial population than a lot of the rest of the country. So 43% of our kids in custody in DCS custody are 13 years of age or older. 30% are 5 to 12, and then the smallest percent is that 0 to 4. The majority of kids who are in DCS custody are there for dependent neglect cases, so 90%, and then 9% for delinquent. Between April 23 and March 24, Tennessee had just over 5,000 youth enter foster care, so a rate of 3.2 per 1,000. We've seen the rate of children re-entering care after previously being there remain pretty consistent between 2017 to 2023. It's usually between 21 to 24% are coming back into care. In fiscal year 23 and 4, 1 in 4 substantiated cases of abuse or neglect were for a drug-exposed child. Second most common were allegations of lack of supervision. Of first-time foster youth entering the system in 2022, 38% had been in 3 or more placements by the end of 2023. And then among those entering in 2023, 31% had been in 3 or more placements by the end of that year. What we do see in fiscal 22 is that 98.5% of infants with prenatal substance exposure had a plan of safe care in place, which is the highest, third highest percent in the country, which is extremely encouraging for those challenging cases. In fiscal year 2023, there was 2,400 children served by the Relative Caregiver Program. In calendar year 23, less than 1% of children who had been in the custody of a relative caregiver who received those direct assistance payments entered into state custody. As of the end of 2023, 64% of children who had exited care in fiscal 24 had exited to reunification. And then also in fiscal year 24, there was 408 youth who accepted extension of foster care services, and that represents the largest number of youth ever served by that program. With youth justice placements, this is a one-day snapshot done by DCS each year, looking at, I believe it's April 1st, where are youth placed of those who are in the delinquent side custody. And so we've seen that there's a fewer percentage of youth who are in community-based placements, and then an increase in that yellow percent, which is the JJ enhanced staff secure. So in 2016, about 71% of youth were in community-based placements. In 2023, it was 28% once you add in those who are on a trial home visit. Additionally, we see the majority of youth who are in a juvenile detention center are there for less than 24 hours, 41%. However, there are a group that are there for more than 30 days. 11% are there for more than 30 days. Juvenile detention centers aren't really set up to provide long-term care and services for children. So to be there for more than 30 days, there would be some challenges with services. And then we continue to track the youth crime rate. So dark blue is the overall all ages crime rate. And then the light blue is the age 10 to 17 crime rate. And this is kind of just the trend that we're seeing over the decade. There was a larger than usual drop in 2020 when kids were stuck at home during the pandemic. They were better behaved across the board. We saw crime drop, we saw substance use drop, other risk behaviors drop among teens. And so it's kind of gone back up since then. And then as Richard mentioned, all of this information is available on our new data dashboard. And so we provide this resource. Citizens, users can see pre-made infographics, access county level indicators, see changes in child well-being, and then download the data if they'd like. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very
Thank
much. We'll take a few questions. Representative Bosso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Graves, for that detailed presentation. You obviously went over a number of things that are alarming, but the one that stood out to me as most alarming was the data that you provided that indicates that 1 in 4 high school students in Tennessee have thought about suicide over the past year. 1 in 5 have actually made plans, and 1 in 7 have actually attempted suicide. Mm-hmm. And as an attorney, naturally, I'm skeptical of the accuracy of those results because they just don't strike me as possibly being accurate. So my question simply is, how was that data gathered, and what can you give us in terms of specifics as to who gathered it and who was surveyed and what questions were asked to obtain that data?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, so it's a good question, and that's one that comes up quite a bit. So this information comes from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And so that is conducted in partnership through the Department of Education and administered to schools across the state. With the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, that is something that comes up a lot because people say, I know high schoolers, I'm just going to circle every dot and then be done with it. So they have, with that survey, done a lot of survey validation to track trends over time to make sure they're still getting accurate numbers. If they get too small of responses or responses that don't feel like it's weighted enough, they can suppress that data and they won't report it if it doesn't feel accurate. One of the other things that we did is because we've seen all of these indicators, both considering attempting suicide, making a plan, and attempting suicide, they've gone up each year since 2017. And so then we looked at what's happening with suicide deaths. If we have more kids reporting this, then theoretically you would have more suicide deaths. And so we've seen an increase each year, kind of matching that pattern of deaths by suicide for this same age group. We pulled it, this is a 2-year survey, so we pulled it for every 2 years that the survey was asked, and we saw that same pattern of increasing. We've also, over the same time period, seen an increase in not necessarily suicide deaths, but ER visits due to suicide attempts.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 follow-up questions. One, was the survey administered to all high school students in the state of Tennessee? And then secondly, do you have in front of you the actual numbers for how many suicides were actually successful in Tennessee in the last 2 years?
Ms.
Um,
Graves?
Yes. So I don't believe that it was administered to all high school students. That Department of Ed would probably be the better ones to answer that. I do believe there's also a component of it that's either depending on the year that the survey was administered, either had to be opt-in or opt-out of that survey. But I do know that they try and get kind of a representative sample and that data is processed to weigh out for other students. Let me check on the suicide deaths. Where are we? So when we look at suicide deaths, we were looking at age 19 or 9 to 17. That was kind of the youngest age we saw a suicide death occur was 9. And so from 2019 to 2022, there was 146 suicide deaths among that age group in Tennessee.
Good. Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us and sharing this information. I'm kind of going to bounce off of his comment. Out of those 1 in 7 attempts, that's about, if my math is correct, about 14 out of 100 that do that. Is there any data that shows a difference between children in that age group that may have social media and made those attempts versus children who do not use social media and maybe made those attempts?
So so in the survey, they ask these questions, and then they also ask, there was a couple of questions about how many hours a day do you use social media or something of that nature. I know in the survey, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, they ask a whole host of things. They ask, are you eating your vegetables? Are you wearing your seatbelt? So I do know in the past couple of years, they have started asking about social media use. And so probably you could, I don't think we have access to it right now, but you could probably try and overlay, okay, what percent of kids are reporting that they were using social media multiple hours a day, and then also indicated it. So we can talk with Department of Ed and see if we might be able to get it. But I do know that they asked that and they asked about social media. So there might be a way to try and figure that out.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you all as well. It's a lot of information, tremendous amount of information. I mean, tons of information. And you can drill down on any of those categories and ask a lot of pertinent questions. But since we're talking about suicide, I want to know, what are we doing as an agency to prevent suicide from occurring? What does the state do for that?
Yeah, so I think, I think it's a cross-agency. I mean, obviously mental health and substance abuse services carries a lot of that work. I think Department of Ed does a lot of work. I think the ideal goal is getting to kids before they're getting to this point of considering ending their life. There's the new 988 number, which will allow, particularly for teens, the benefit of texting. They may not be comfortable calling the 988 number, but they've gotten that. There's the Child Behavioral Health Safety Net. One of the things that we know is that youth are a lot more likely to participate in mental health services when they're at their schools, just because of ease of access. When you have outpatient mental health services and you're not a teen who can drive yourself yet, you have to work with your parents' schedule, you have to work with transportation, things like that. So getting mental health providers into the schools to provide that care there is really big. Additionally, one of the things we know is that youth, they did some surveying during the pandemic, and similar to overlaying the mental health and social media, they looked at youth who felt like they belonged in their school, or that at least one person at their school cared for them. And youth who indicated just one person caring for them had about a 50% lower instance of suicidal behaviors. And so I think kind of establishing those community connections is really important as well.
Okay. Are you all able to track what you're doing, as well as the categories that young people find themselves in that tilt the scale for them. It may be homelessness. I'm just tossing out stuff. It may be a boyfriend, girlfriend. It may be drugs. Are we tracking those categories that were top 5 or 10 that create a suicidal situation?
So I would imagine that mental health is. I'm not certain. I know with the this information that's filled out with high schoolers, they will separate it out. Like I have male and female here.
Right.
They'll sometimes look at 10th graders versus 12th graders, things of that nature. I know there's things like you mentioned of various adversities, challenges, placing kids at greater risk. I don't know to the extent that mental health is keeping up with that.
Okay, I'd like to find that out. I'd like for y'all to find that out because I believe that if you can tease it out, okay, and figure out what these concerns are that children are having. Excuse me. Now we're grown. People in this room, most of everyone here is grown. If you can remember back, certain problems that you encountered when you were young, you thought they were the end of the world. But if you give yourself a little time, it's not. So we can find out as we tease this stuff out, what are these categories that they're having these problems in? We can put our resources targeted towards that. Okay, the girl you love, you won't like her 10 years from now at all. The boy is the same thing. It happens over and over and over again, but it's just something bad and the whole world is ending. But if you catch me in an uncompromising situation on the net today, their lives are well, right here. You think the world is ending. The world is not ending. We got to figure out those categories that create a scenario that makes them want to go there. Okay.
Absolutely.
Because our children they're smart, they're wise, but they're weak because they don't have the moral foundation that a lot of older children had. Okay. And so they go, figure out a permanent solution for a temporary problem. Okay. And they don't understand that, but this is our job. I'd like to see the state focusing on that kind of stuff. So we stop all the statistics and data we get is fine. I don't need that. I want the data that's going to show where we prevented this kid from killing himself. That's what I'm interested in. Okay. Stopping people from killing themselves. Okay. At a young age. Some of this stuff, when you get older, you laugh about it. That you all worked up. I'm all shook up about that when I was a kid. Okay. But that's a child's mind. They're not at that level. That's a child's mind. Okay. Many times those are training, learning episodes in your life to teach you how to cope with things in life when things don't go your way. Okay. That's very important. Fighting, bullying, it's always been around. When I was a kid. But when we were kids, the coach, some of the men in the school, you don't like this guy, you don't like this girl, but not with the girls, but with the guys. Hey, after school, we put the boxing gloves on. And you all boxing, you got it out of your system, it was never a problem again. They became best friends. Okay. But it was now the kids will take it to the nth degree and do something to themselves. Or the difference between suicide and homicide is what? Who you kill. But it's still side. Okay. So if the switch is flipped in your mind, then I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to kill a whole bunch of other people. Okay. So we have to figure out how to get into that mindset and create an environment where it ain't as bad as you think it is. Okay. That's something I'd like to see done. Prevention. Okay. The service is fine, but how do we stop our kids from killing themselves? Okay. And others. If we can stop them from killing themselves, do the same thing for others. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I would like to make a few comments since I do serve on
Yes,
the
absolutely.
second look, and it's come a long way, and a lot of legislation has come out of there, like the autopsy bill, where they have to, if there's another child in the home or abuse is considered or suspected, well, then they have to move that child to the top of the list instead of waiting 2 or 3 years. They have to do the autopsy right away because there might be more kids in the home. So we want to make sure that they're safe as well. So a lot of good things have come out of the second look. But I did want to say a few things. TFAX is, it's old and it's been there a long time, and they are working hard to replace that. So once they do, it's going to be a whole lot easier for all of us, and especially you and DCS's job as well. And the transitional homes, I think they were a problem at the beginning, but I do think that, and some of this started at the, the first of the year, it's a whole year project. But I think we've come a long way with the transitional houses too. So I did want to say that. But, we didn't talk about that at the end. We talked about it when it was happening, and it was a big part of our day, our committee meeting. Several times, several meetings. But anyway, I do think they've come a long ways with that too. So, I just want to give a little credit there because I do think they're working hard on all of these things. And there's a lot of kids and there's a lot of meanness and a lot of good parents, but a lot of bad parents as well. So anyway, thank you so much for coming and good luck. And I forgot to introduce you, but thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for being here as well. So, and you sounded just fine.
Oh, yeah, I did want to take a moment. So if y'all have any questions, I am scheduled to have a baby on Monday. So I am going to be gone. But we do have Jordan Wally on our team. He is kind of going to be filling in for me. So if y'all have any questions related to this presentation, legislation, anything like that, he will be around. I will not.
Well, we wish you well. And I
Thank
brought
you.
that up at the beginning, but yes, because I didn't think you would. After you came to my office last week, I wasn't sure you would be here.
I was
So good luck to you.
preparing all
So-
kinds of things in
Yes,
case
and
I
you
wasn't
did-
here
You
today.
did very well, and you have to be a little anxious too to be here. So thank you, and thank you for the work you do, and thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy, for being here as well. So without objection, we're going to go back into session. And seeing no further business, without objection, we stand adjourned.
Subject.
Out of order.